Okay. So just to start us off, I just want to remind everybody to get the most out of this webinar. It is being recorded, so I know that some people weren't able to attend the live webinar, so we will be sending up a follow-up email with the recording of the entire webinar. So if you have to cut out early, or if for some reason you miss it today, we will be sending it out to everybody that registered. And we welcome any questions from the audience today, so feel free to type your questions in the Q&A feature, and all of the panelists and I as the hosts are able to view those. So we will do our best to make sure that they get answered during our webinar today. And it's always helpful to put your window in the full screen mode so that you get the view of everything we'll be talking about today. So just first off, to introduce myself, my name is Christy Mayo. I'm the Director of Enrollment and Records for the Van Andel Institute Graduate School. Again, I just want to welcome everybody today. We're so happy that you were able to join us. So I'm just going to start off by giving a little bit of background about Van Andel Institute and the graduate school. And then we have a wonderful panel of 3 of our faculty members that are going to talk today as well. So why Van Andel Institute? Well, we're a biomedical research institute located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So if you've never been to Michigan, you can see on the map on your screen, Grand Rapids is located on the west side of Michigan. We're about 45 minutes from Lake Michigan, roughly 2 hours from Detroit and 3 hours from Chicago, just to kind of give you an idea of where we're located. The Institute focuses on basic biomedical research. So we have 5 departments that include neurodegenerative disease, metabolism and nutritional programming, structural biology, epigenetics, and cell biology. So that's the type of research that we do at the Institute. And then as far as our graduate school, so we have the Research Institute, which is roughly 450 employees. And then within the Research Institute, we have our small independent graduate school. So we have a charter from the state of Michigan to grant PhD degrees in molecular and cellular biology. But the type of research you do for your dissertation is completely dependent on the lab that you choose. So as I mentioned, right now we have about 35 labs concentrated in those 5 departments. So what makes us different is that we're an independent research institute, not a traditional university. The mission of our graduate school is to develop biomedical research leaders. So, and that can mean many different things. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the panel. One thing that we hear time and time again from our current students as well as our alumni is that the students are scientists and colleagues. They're not treated, like as lowly graduate students. They're really an integral part of our community and the Institute. Another aspect that makes us really different is our problem-based learning curriculum that's part of our first year, which I'm going to show you in just a second in a little bit more detail. We also offer outstanding financial and student support. So our financial package is probably the best that you'll find. Our students all of the students admitted to the program receive a generous living stipend of $36,000, roughly. That's what it is for this year, and we increase it a little bit each year. They pay no tuition, health, dental, and vision insurance are provided, a brand new laptop computer, as well as $2,000 every year to travel to scientific conferences. We feel like that's a really important part of a graduate education, is to be a part of those research conferences, to get out there and meet the people that are doing research in the areas that our students are, so that they can develop that external network of mentors. And then student support, we're a small graduate school. I don't think I mentioned, we currently have 44 students total. And we're looking to bring in our largest cohort next year of 15 students. But even in such a small graduate school, we recognize the importance of student support, mentally, emotionally. So we have a full-time staff member completely dedicated to providing that support, which is really unusual and not something that you would find in other graduate programs, especially a graduate program of our size. And then another thing that makes it wonderful, because we only have 44 students and because our cohorts are fairly small, it really creates a wonderful collaborative community where, the students are really supportive of one another. It's not the competitive environment that can be common in other programs or other schools. This picture that I have on the screen right now is an actual picture from our last Graduate Student Association meeting. So this is in our classroom, in our graduate school building, our students working and meeting together to be supportive of one another. So to get back to the problem-based learning curriculum, this is just a diagram of our first year. So, and really this is the piece where we integrate the problem-based learning. So just to briefly explain it, the blue arrows that you see along the top, each one is dedicated to a different area of research that we do at the Institute. We refer to those as our SABRE modules, which is just an acronym for Strategic Approaches to Biomedical Research. So each of those blue arrows is a 4-week-long concentrated course focused on that specific research area. So these are not course titles, they're just broad research areas. And the Van Andel Institute faculty member that directs the course, we either, depending on the module, there's 1 or 2 faculty members in each. So they pose a research question to the cohort of first-year students, and they help direct the students to figure out what they need to know about the research question. And they also help facilitate writing a mini grant application, or basically the specific aims page of a grant application. So the beauty of that is, as our students go through the first year, those 5 modules, so you see the blue line down the center is dividing fall semester and spring semester. Those 5 modules, alternating with our rotations, really build on one another. And the students do more and more. In the beginning, they're doing it all in small groups, but as they move through those modules throughout the first year, they're doing more independently and really sharpening those skills, getting lots of practice with presenting their research ideas and doing the grant application process. And you'll see below the arrows representing the modules and the rotations, it lists the titles of our other courses that our students take. So those are not condensed. Those are semester-long courses that usually meet for once a week. And so I'm not going to read them all. You can see the titles there. At the end of the first year, our students make their thesis mentor selection, usually around May 1st. So they select their thesis lab from the 3 rotations that they've done. And then there's also a take-home exam that covers the SABRE modules. So that's kind of a broad overview of our first year curriculum, because we recognize that it's really unique and different from other institutions. So now I want to move on to introduce our panel. So this is 3 of our 35 wonderful faculty. We have Dr. Russell Jones, who's the chair and professor of the Department of Metabolism and Nutritional Programming. We have Dr. Connie Krawcheck, who's an associate professor from the Department of Metabolism and Nutritional Programming. And one of our newer PIs, this is Dr. Stephanie Granger, who's an assistant professor in our Department of Cell Biology. So I'm gonna start off by just letting each of them kind of introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about their research and also kind of their path here at the Institute. Maybe we wanna start with, Connie, do you wanna start?
I think we were gonna start with Rusty as the chair of the department.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
Rusty, go ahead.
No worries. Thanks, Christy. Appreciate the introduction, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. As Christy mentioned, my name is Russell Jones, and I'm the chair of the Department of Metabolism and Nutritional Programming here at the Institute. It's actually one of our newer programs at the Institute. We started in 2018, so really it's a 3-year new program at the Institute. And the whole point is really focusing on the researchers within the department really focus on cellular mechanisms of metabolism and how nutrition and diet can actually control these processes. So metabolism is a little bit of a large question. So really, I think what we're really, to summarize it, we're really trying to understand in how metabolic programs, so programs in which cells make energy from nutrients, how these programs play important roles in chronic diseases. So the researchers in our department really have focus areas on multiple areas, from immunology and cancer all the way to developmental biology and a mechanism or a process known as intergenerational inheritance affecting metabolism, which is how environmental nutrient exposure in parents can be transmitted to offspring. So I think there's lots of really interesting research areas in our department. Myself, I'm an immunologist by training, and also did my postdoctoral work in cancer biology. So my lab particularly focuses on the immune system and basically how immune cells or cancer cells fuel themselves, and in particular, the interaction between these two cell types and how we can basically harness metabolism in the immune system to fight cancer.
Thanks, Rusty. Connie, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as Rusty mentioned, I'm part of the Metabolism and Nutritional Programming group. But as he mentioned, we're all, in this group, we're all scientists attacking different questions in different disciplines and biology, with at least part of our program focused on metabolism. And so I'm, by training, an immunologist, a medical or molecular immunologist. And my lab is particularly interested in immune cell programming, so how immune cells are programmed to give them the potential to respond a certain way. And we sort of hypothesize that based on this programming, immune cells in different individuals, for example, will have different potential to respond to an immunological threat. For example, COVID, we see a lot of differences in the way people respond from asymptomatic to being very sick and dying from infection. And so how might immune programming influence these outcomes? And the mechanisms that we're studying are both metabolic mechanisms, but epigenetic mechanisms as well. So the Institute has a very strong epigenetics department. And so there's five departments. There's epigenetics, structural biology, neurodegeneration, cell biology, and our department. And what's nice about this is, I came here for the reason to expand my research program in epigenetics. I really wanted to couple epigenetic and metabolic programming. And I had no real training or experience in epigenetics. So in a way, when I came 3 years ago, I was also sort of a student learning all of these new things with great colleagues who were willing to teach me as a professor. They have that same approach for teaching students, really just taking someone and helping them understand a topic in great detail. And so the majority of my research program has moved to epigenetic programming with metabolism in mind, to look at immune function. So just as a bit, I've been here about 3 years, and the reason I moved here, I was at McGill University prior to coming. I'm Canadian, and I was at McGill University prior to coming to Grand Rapids, and it was really that reason that I came, is to really get this opportunity to do interdisciplinary work. We have 5 different departments, and this is a unique opportunity to really work closely with people in other disciplines. And that's really what drove me to come to build out in epigenetics, build out and still build out in metabolism, but then yet have all of these interactions with other people. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on that. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Granger. And lest everyone think that everyone here is an immunologist by training, I'm not. I'm a developmental biologist and a stem cell biologist. So I did my PhD work at the University of Ottawa in Ontario, Canada, and that was focused on how the intestinal stem cell develops and how transcription factors regulate that developmental biology. And then I was interested in sort of really switching up my skill set. And so for my postdoctoral work, I moved to San Diego and I moved into studying how blood stem cells develop and using zebrafish as a model system. I'd done mouse mostly in my PhD. And so I'm interested now in how zebrafish make their blood stem cells. The reason for that is that blood stem cells are the lineage restricted stem cell that give rise to the full complement of your blood, and they're the cell that are curative in a bone marrow transplant. So when we cure patients of diseases of the blood like leukemia or lymphoma, we take out their diseased bone marrow supply of blood stem cells and we give them a healthy one through a bone marrow transplant. But we can't actually make enough bone marrow transplant matches for the number of patients in need. So one of the major goals in our field is to figure out how to make blood stem cells in a dish so we'd be able to circumvent the need for a bone marrow transplant. So we use zebrafish because they're see-through and we can actually watch that developmental biology happen in real time. And then we're looking at the genetic and signaling cues that lead to blood stem cells being developed in zebrafish and translating that to the dish to see if we can make blood stem cells from a specialized population of stem cells called induced pluripotent stem cells that we can actually make from patient-specific samples. And so I was really interested in the Van Andel Institute because of the close collaborations that we have across departments. So my expertise is in cell biology, stem cell biology, signaling and development. But like Connie, I'm also interested in expanding my research program into areas outside of that, like epigenetics. And so having colleagues that are just willing to sit down and help me out with that and help further my own research program is really great. Also, the resources that we have here at the Van Andel Institute are bar none the best that I have seen around this area for sure. And so I'm really excited to be able to start up my lab here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Rusty, did you want to, I know you introduced the department and your research. Did you want to talk a little bit more about what brought you to the Institute?
Yes, I could do that. I think for my own personal reasons, I was also a professor at McGill University for 10 years. And my main motivation for coming here was to basically start this new program in metabolism. And so a lot of the research that we do in metabolism is technologically driven. One of the main sort of platforms that we use is a technique known as metabolomics, where we're profiling small molecules in biological systems using mass spectrometry. And these are not cheap machines and also require a lot of expertise to develop. So part of my motivation for moving was to basically set up a top-notch facility. And so we do actually have a bioenergetics and metabolomics core facility that we've established at the Institute. And that really fuels a lot of the research of what people in metabolism are doing. And again, you know, I think there are only a handful of really top-end metabolomics facilities in the United States, and one of them is right here at our institute. So that's one of the bonuses of being here.
Thanks, Rusty. And we have gotten a few questions from the audience members. Stephanie, would you like to go ahead and answer the first one?
Sure. So Anasuya wants, I hope I pronounced that correctly, wants to know about whether or not she can study structural biology at the VAI. And yes, we have a whole department dedicated to structural biology with many of the leading experts in the world actually working here. So The area of specialization that you end up getting in your PhD really depends on the lab that you join. And we certainly have opportunities here for structural biology.
Thanks, Stephanie. Our next question, I think Rusty was going to go ahead with that one.
Yeah, so Bright had a question about drug discovery and if there was any drug discovery research going on at Vandal. I think the one thing to distinguish is that we don't have a formal pharmacology department at the Institute. And so again, there isn't a dedicated department for studying drugs and drug interactions. What I would say is that many of the labs at the Institute have drug discovery programs built into their research. Particularly labs in cancer biology and neuroscience, and even our Department of Metabolism, investigators are working on different aspects of therapeutics in their model systems. So I think what you really, one thing to do if you're interested in drug discovery, I think one of the things to do is to look at the research profiles of the different investigators at the Institute to see who is involved with this. And then knowing full well that many of the labs have built-in drug discovery platforms or pipelines, so to say, in this. And so a great example of this in the Department of Neurodegenerative Science, the department's currently building out a platform for induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs, and a screening platform to look at different cells of the central nervous system and how they respond to a screening. And so Darren Moore from the department is building out a whole platform for CRISPR-based screening, which again is one of the first steps in essentially a target identification pipeline for neuroscience. And that's going to be open to the Institute. So I think that if you have an interest in drug discovery or basically target identification, there are opportunities to do that type of work here.
Great, thanks, Rusty. I think, Connie, you were going to take, we got a question that came in through the chat through Jamie. I think Connie's going to answer that one for us.
Yeah, so Jamie asked a very important question. What kinds of careers can you pursue with a PhD? And so I'll sort of answer this from the perspective of just getting your PhD in general, and then maybe add a few points about why our degree program, I think, prepares you in a different way than other degree programs. So a lot of people are stuck in the mindset that if I do a PhD, I have to continue on in academic research. And that's really just simply not the case. The majority of people who obtain PhDs go on and have successful careers in things other than academic research. So of course you can do the traditional PhD and then the traditional postdoctoral fellowship after your PhD, which is another approximately 5 years of research training before you apply to start your independent lab as a faculty member or professor at an institute. But that's one path. And what I didn't mention earlier is that I did a standard or traditional postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania. But after that, I actually went to Merck for 3 years and worked in drug discovery. And so this is a common and popular option right now, is to go into biotech or pharmaceutical industry. And you can do that straight out of your PhD, or you can do your traditional postdoc and go in after you postdoc for a few years. And there's a lot of money being put into drug discovery, technology development, et cetera, that you'll find in biotech and pharmaceutical industry. And then within those contexts, depending on your experience and your expertise, you'll have the opportunity to grow and advance in different types of roles. A lot of them can be different types of leadership roles. So that's one common pathway that people take. A lot of other people take a teaching track pathway. So you may decide during your graduate studies that you like teaching, you like the classroom environment. And so there's a lot of professor roles that have more of a teaching emphasis. And so you can be involved in teaching with a little bit of research, or solely teaching at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, the professional level. That's a common track. Another common track is writing. Medical writers, people with PhDs are medical writers, different types of writers, either technical or more journalistic style. That's a common pathway. I would say that, and then there's, you know, in your PhD, we're really training you to be critical thinkers. So your research is what you become an expert in, but what we're looking to develop in our students is critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, managerial experience, teamwork, and leadership. And all of these things can serve you in almost any kind of profession you want to pursue. And so that's why in our program, and just to come back a little bit to our program, there's really emphasis on this problem solving, critical thinking skills that we want to develop in the SABRE, the first year curriculum. We're really looking to develop the scientists in a way that they can get new information, find new information themselves, and start thinking about their scientific problem and solving their scientific problem. And this is really essential, particularly, well, if you go in the traditional route to academic research, but if you also go off into industry, you might hear from industry that your projects can change depending on the interest of the company and whatnot. And so you really want to be a person that can adapt and take in the new information. Even if it's within your narrow field, there's always new papers coming out. So we want to make sure the students develop in that way, but also develop some of the professional skills that you don't always get in graduate school. You can take a course on conference organization. Mm-hmm. You can take various professional development schools. There's been a lot of requests, so emphasis on bioinformatics and developing those skill sets. You can do an independent study if you decide, oh, there's some skill or information I want to learn, and it's not part of the core curriculum here. You can do an independent study and bring that and get that training that you need. So we don't have a lot of core immunology courses here, but our students can take credit and take them through other organizations. So I think that is one thing that's unique about this program is we're looking to develop the entire individual into, as Christy said, a biomedical scientist, and not just have them become, do a bunch of research, have a thesis, and just really be an expert in one type of thing. It's equally about personal development.
Thanks, Connie. I think our next question is from Emmanuel. Rusty, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, Emmanuel had a question, and there about molecular parasitology, and there was another question about immunology. And so this is actually an important point. People are asking about specific subject areas. Again, I would really encourage exploring the researchers' profiles in the different departments at the Institute to get a good idea about what people are covering. Specifically regarding immunology and microbiology, we do not have a core department in this area, but we do have many investigators who study aspects of immunology and microbiology. So for example, Connie's lab and my lab both have very strong immunology focus, foci. There are a couple labs in the neurodegenerative department that actually work on the immune system in neurodegenerative disease. So there's a lot of crosstalk between, or application of different areas such as immunology into, again, different disease settings. And I just would encourage you to explore the researcher profiles at the Institute in order to get an idea. These are research areas that interest you.
Great, yeah, and Emmanuel also had a question about the acceptance rate for international students. So we actually have on our website, we're very open about our student and admissions and outcome statistics. They're posted on our website as far as our acceptance rate, how many applications we receive, the composition of our student community. I can tell you that currently of our 44 students, 31% are international. And I'm happy to, when we send out the follow-up with the recording, I'll make sure to provide a link to that portion of our website because it has some really good information for people. Also, to add on to what Connie had mentioned about the alumni, one benefit of being a small institution is that we have all of our current students, as well as all of our alumni listed on our website, as well as what they've moved on into. So it's really easy to see, they're, oh, okay, one of them is now at Harvard doing her postdoc. Others have moved on to industry. Others have moved on into academia. So I'll provide those links in our follow-up email so that, everybody can take a look at those sections of our website. Moving on into our next question from Elisa, or Alyssa, I apologize, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Stephanie, you want to take that question?
Sure. So this is a question, actually, I'm seeing a common theme of questions where people are asking us if it's possible to do research in a particular area or a particular lab for their PhD. And so just in general, the way that this program works is that what I would start with, as Rusty suggested, is just checking out faculty profiles and looking for faculty that you're interested in potentially working with. And then your next step would be to apply for the program. And so we have an application up on our website that Christy, I'm sure, will give details before the end of this webinar about. And so you'll apply to the program. Your application will get reviewed by a panel of faculty members and also people at the graduate school. And we'll decide whether or not your background experience and your education is a good fit for our institute. Then people come and interview. And so during the first year of graduate school, once you're accepted to the program, you'll do what are called rotations. And so you'll spend some time in 3 labs that you identify as being labs that you're interested in working in. And during that time, you evaluate whether or not the lab is a good fit for you. And we as the lab evaluate whether or not you're a good fit for the lab. And that's sort of how you find your place in the institute once you've been accepted. So hopefully that answers a lot of the questions that people have here about which labs they would end up in once they get admitted, or how to figure out where they end up going.
Yeah, so I'll make sure after we're done with the panel to go over a little bit more detail about the application, the deadline, and that information. It seems like that's a pretty common theme in the question and answer. But does anybody have any other specific questions for our panelists? I can say someone had asked about how long does it usually take students to graduate. Our average time to degree is roughly 5.5 years. We're a young institution. We've only been around since 2007. So, that really varies because our numbers are smaller. So we've had students, dependent on the type of thesis project that they chose, that were able to complete in 4 years. There's also been a couple of people that it took them a little longer, till 6 years, but our average is right in that 5-year range. And we do guarantee funding for all of our graduate students until they complete their PhD. So, there's no situation in which a student would all of a sudden, like, the timer would run out and they would run out of funding. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
There was a question about postdoc, and I know I can't find it now, but I know this is a webinar about the graduate school, but if you're already in graduate school, or you know someone in graduate school that might be interested in doing a postdoctoral fellowship here, there are a lot of postdoctoral fellows at the Institute, and it's a separate program. So if you go to the Van Andel Research website and look for the postdoctoral program page, you'll find that. And equally, the postdocs, of course, are focused on their research, but there's also professional development available for them.
Okay, I'm just going through our questions to see what we have not yet answered.
There's a question about a 6-month dissertation program for master's students, and VAI does not offer this as a program. They do not offer a master's program specifically, right, Christy? I believe finish with a master's under special circumstances.
Correct.
But we don't specifically offer a master's program. And for those international students, so as I mentioned, I'm Canadian. In Canada, you typically go into a master's program and then either complete it and do a PhD or transfer into the PhD program. And so in the US, it's a bit different. You typically go straight into the PhD program. So I know this varies across countries, so that might clarify that for any international listeners.
Someone asked about advice for submitting a strong application to graduate school. So when you're writing up your personal statement, one of the things that's really important is that you reflect on your experiences so far, and also on where you want to get to and how we can help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
So we like to see a really good fit in our program.
Mm-hmm.
So if you submit to us a really generic research statement or personal statement saying that, you know, you just really want to do research and you'll do research anywhere, that's not as enticing to us as someone who identifies particular faculty members that they're very interested in, because it will help them reach their professional goals in XYZ different ways. And so my best advice to you on submitting a strong application is to really think about how you fit into the Institute and how the Institute can help support you in your professional goals. And that also applies to people applying for postdoctoral fellowships. So when I see applications come across my desk that don't even mention what work we do in the lab or why they're interested in it, that's not really a postdoc that I identify as someone who's very interested in my lab. They're just interested in a place somewhere, anywhere. And so you really have to think about what it is that we can do for you and what the fit is there, and that will make your application a lot stronger.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I want to echo that too. So I just advance to our next slide that has a little bit more information about the application. Not that if you have questions specifically for our panel, I encourage you to type those into the Q&A function. But our application is open and on our website. If you're looking for a future year, our application usually opens in mid-July. So just keep that in mind. We are part of BioMedCast, which is a centralized application system for some biomedical programs, which allows you to fill out an application once and then have it sent to multiple universities. Our application is free. Our application is free. I will say, as part of BioMedCast, each program within that system has their own admissions requirements and also a fee structure. So if you're only applying to Van Andel Institute Graduate School, the application is free. But if you're applying to multiple programs, obviously you have to pay the application fees for the other programs. We do not require the GRE exam. Our deadline is December 1st. I will say a lot of times people ask me kind of about that evaluation process and timeline. So as Stephanie mentioned, we have a committee of faculty members and an upper division student that review all of our applications immediately following the deadline. So we have a really tight timeline, which is why we suggest to our applicants that they make sure everything is submitted by that deadline. We are willing to accept materials and applications after the December 1 deadline. However, it's really hard to evaluate an application if it's missing specifically letters of recommendation. That's often the thing that doesn't come in by the deadline. So I really encourage applicants to strongly encourage their recommenders, to ask them to make sure those are turned in by the deadline so that the committee can make an informed decision about the application. So all of those are reviewed immediately following the deadline. There's a meeting of the entire committee that goes over all the applications in mid-December. And then by the end of December, emails are sent out to all of the applicants. Those that are invited for interviews receive that type of email. And then those that are not being invited for interviews receive an email as well by the end of December. And we hold our interviews in January and February. because we're a small institute and we bring in small groups of candidates, we are planning to do that in person this year. I know obviously COVID-19 is still very much with us, and we're taking all the necessary precautions needed at the Institute, but because we bring in those small groups, we're able to accommodate for on-site visits. So for those that live within the United States, we invite them to visit us at the Institute for a couple of days. For those that live outside of the United States, we hold those interviews virtually. And then our offers of admission are made kind of all throughout that interview period. So, and as I mentioned, our goal for 2022 is to bring in a cohort of 15 students. What other questions do we have? Let's see, I'm just going to go through and see if we missed anything.
There's a question about contacting a PI for applying before applying. So,
oh yeah.
So no, you don't have to contact a PI. And when prospective students reach out to me directly, I really just refer them to this website here in admissions and tell them they need to apply. This is again different than how it works in some other countries where you contact the PI first, secure your position with the PI, and then apply to the program. But I will say, having worked in both systems, it really doesn't hurt to reach out to the PI if you're applying and you're interested. Then they kind of have an idea that someone might be coming through the program that's interested in their research. And it might be helpful for you to reach out to the PIs and say, I'm thinking of applying, and you know, and kind of assess whether their research is of interest to you. Because we have a multidisciplinary institute, you're applying to a program that has a lot of different disciplines, and you want to sort of make sure that a lot of those possibilities are of interest to you. Because if you are just really focused on one thing, there may not be so many labs that are just working on that one thing. And so I think our program might be best suited, and not exclusively best suited. There are of course students that come in that are interested in one thing, but might be well suited to people who are curious in general, or curious about science and like learning things, and then they may discover something during their rotations that they've never thought of before, thought about before, and do their PhD in that area.
I want to ask the panel, and whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead and do that. What would you say are the challenges and the advantages of a small research institute? So, you know, there's not a lot of PhD programs in research institutes. It's a really different environment. So what would you all say, what makes that different from going through like a university PhD program?
Does anyone intend? I can jump in because it was sort of extended off what I was saying before. So I think, you know, there can be a bit of a disadvantage in the sense is that you don't have a huge critical mass in your area. For example, I'm an immunologist, and we don't have a large immunology group here. And so, that can be a disadvantage in any one of our programs, but I think it's well balanced by the opportunity to learn about different areas of science and open your critical mind. For me, I really like that aspect. As I mentioned, I was in industry for a while, and you have to learn about chemistry, medicinal chemistry, DMPK, pharmacology, and so you're constantly learning about new things in different areas that you're working on. And so I think that's fantastic to have that opportunity. The other thing that is different is we're all in one building. So the graduate school itself has just moved to another building, but all the researchers are in one building. So you will actually see all of the PIs that are part of this institute and actually have the opportunity to run into them, have a discussion. You know, it's a bit like when I was at Merck Frost in Montreal, all of the chemists and DMPK and everybody were together in one building. And then when people moved to Rahway in New Jersey, you know, chemistry was one building and biology was another building and pharmacology was another building, and you had that separation. So so that is really nice that you can actually engage regularly with the faculty, with the postdocs, with the other students. The students seem like a really tight cohort each year. The cohorts really bond and go through all of this together. So I think like those are some of the advantages and disadvantages I see.
I can jump in on that as well. I think the difference of the grad school, as Connie nicely articulated, is that small nature and cohesiveness. So if you're looking for that in your graduate studies, this could be a very good place for you. I think the difference is, I did my PhD training in a department in the University of Toronto called Medical Biophysics. And it was a department that was very similar to the graduate school at VAI, in which there were many different research areas, from medical physics to cell biology to immunology to cancer therapeutics, all under one umbrella. And I think the advantages from that is that you learned about a ton of science that was outside your area just by attending seminars and interacting with people. But then you also had to communicate your work to these other areas. So you become very, very well versed in how to communicate your science to people that aren't experts in your area. This would be contrasting to a traditional department, such as a department of immunology or a department of genetics, where you're strictly focusing on one area and you're surrounded by a ton of people in that area, which has its advantages too. But for example, you may only be immersed in that subject area. I think there's a eye to a broad knowledge at our institute that is favored by this structure.
Thanks, Rusty. Stephanie, did you have, not that you have to, is there anything that you wanted to mention?
No, I just think that the community is a lot more tight-knit here than it was, at least in the department I did my PhD in. So we have a lot of activities, research in progress meetings, where people regularly interact. And because we're just geographically small, right? We're housed mostly in one building. You run into these people every day. And so it's really nice because we actually interact with almost everyone in the Institute, on a weekly or monthly basis.
And I can speak from the point of view of someone who's not a faculty member. I've been at the Institute for a little bit over 6 years, and there is something really special about just the community and the nature of the people that work there. Everybody knows everybody on a first name basis, and it's just it's a different type of environment. I think that you are not likely to get in a large university or that type of thing. Let's see. I don't know if maybe we'll just go through the panel one more time. If you guys have anything that you'd like to add or any other advice that you'd like to share with the audience today before we wrap up. Or not, that's okay too.
I could jump in really quick, and I think, this is a decision that you're making. It's going to really help to shape your career. So it's not a light decision. I think from my own personal perspective, I think it's really important that you follow your passion for the area that you're interested in. And again, I will go back to the ideas that you want to be working, a large portion of your PhD is going to be done doing research in your thesis lab. And so you really want to be working in an area that you're passionate about. And so I would encourage everyone to, again, look at the profiles of the faculty members in the different departments, because that'll give you a feeling of the research that you could be a part of at the Institute.
And just to add on, the PhD is a big commitment, right? It's usually 5 years of your life. And I know nobody on this panel has regrets about that. I think it's hard work, but it teaches you a lot more than just research skills. There's a lot of professional writing, scientific communication, written communication. And so when you're looking for your PhD mentor, whether it's at Van Andel or someone else, or somewhere else, really look at the mentor and make sure there's like a jive with the mentoring style. What's nice about the Institute here is I see a lot of really good mentoring styles because we're small and the community's tight-knit, and so everyone wants everybody to succeed. So look, as Rusty said, for the area of interest, but also look for the mentoring of the faculty. And then as well as the environment, the environment, I haven't seen any sort of competitive, people are competitive with themselves to do well, and they want to do well in their research, but there's not this in-lab fighting and competitive nature that is counterproductive to good research. And you do see that in some institutions. So environment, mentor, research, look at all of those, and hopefully you'll consider applying to our program.
Yeah, and I think it's a strong program. We're building the next generation of biomedical research leaders. And I would certainly be excited to be a part of that if I were applying to grad school now. So hopefully this is sounding interesting to some of you folks as well.
Well, I just want to express my sincere appreciation to Stephanie, Connie, and Rusty. Honestly, I know you guys have a lot of demands on your plate, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk this morning with our audience and to share in this webinar. I also want to thank everybody who was able to attend today. I hope that you got something valuable out of it, and I would also echo that it's just really important that you find a program that's right for you. And as much as we think that our program is really top-notch, it's not perfect for everyone, and it is really important to find something that's well suited to what you're looking for. So my contact information is on the screen. I encourage anybody that has questions about our program specifically or graduate school in general. Honestly, I'm really, really happy to answer those questions. Also happy to set up half-hour virtual chats if that's something that would be helpful as well. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and I'll be sending out the follow-up email with the recording and some helpful links. But that's it. I hope you have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.